New York, a city where time moves faster than the people trying to outrun it. In a small, cluttered flat in the heart of Brooklyn lives Elio Ramirez, a soft-spoken watchmaker with an old soul. At 32, Elio prefers silence over chatter, gears over gossip, and vintage jazz over traffic noise. His little shop, Timeless Hands, sits quietly between a laundrette and a diner, barely noticed by the bustle of Atlantic Avenue. Elio inherited the shop from his grandfather, a Cuban immigrant who believed that every clock held a secret story and time itself could be reasoned with, even bargained. Elio never took that seriously until the day he found the letter. It was hidden beneath the false bottom of his grandfather's workbench. The envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with a cracked wax insignia, bore only one line in neat cursive. For Elio, when the ticking no longer makes sense. Inside, the letter spoke of a pocket watch unlike any other. Not merely a timepiece, but a conduit, a bridge, a device that once wound could shift the holder through time. Elio chuckled at the absurdity. A time-traveling watch? Impossible. Or so he thought. That evening, as the rain tapped rhythmically against the glass, Elio dusted off a small, ornate watch tucked in the far corner of the display cabinet. It was heavier than it looked, with a coppery gleam that refused to tarnish. When he wound it, the hands did not tick. Instead, they spun violently, then stopped. The world outside the shop froze. No sound. No movement. Not even a flicker of light beyond the door. Then, just as suddenly, time resumed. But something was different. The calendar on the wall now read October, 1971. Elio staggered backwards, breath caught in his throat. He was no longer in his time. He was in his grandfather's New York. And he had no idea how to get back. The streets of 1971 New York buzzed with a different kind of energy. Cars rumbled with square edges and chrome grills. People dressed in high collars and bell-bottoms moved in rhythms Elio recognized only from faded photographs. The scent of tobacco hung heavier in the air, mingling with street vendor hot dogs and exhaust fumes. Elio wandered in a daze through the unfamiliar familiarity. The buildings were the same, yet not. Storefronts bore names that no longer existed in his time. Signs for phone booths and record shops peppered the avenue. No smartphones. No electric cars. Just vinyl records, newspapers, and rotary dials. His heart pounded as he approached what should have been the location of Timeless Hands. The shop was there, sort of. It was smaller, simpler, and bore the name Ramirez and Sons Timepieces. Inside, behind a counter, stood a man with sharp eyes and steady hands. Elio froze. It was his grandfather, young, proud, and very much alive. "Looking for a watch, son?" the man asked, smiling warmly. Elio swallowed hard, unsure whether to speak. He could not reveal who he was. What would that do to the timeline? He had seen enough science fiction to know the dangers. "Just browsing," he muttered, eyes locked on the rows of ticking clocks. The young Rafael Ramirez nodded. "Take your time. Time's patient, even when we're not." Elio's fingers itched toward his pocket. The copper watch still sat there, silent, its hands motionless. How had it brought him here? More importantly, how would he make it work again? He spent the rest of the afternoon in a diner across the street, watching his grandfather through the rain-speckled window. The man moved with purpose, adjusted gears with grace, and greeted every customer like a long-lost friend. Elio suddenly realized how little he truly knew of him. That night, Elio found a cheap room in a boarding house and sat by the window with a notebook and a borrowed pen. He began writing everything down, the smells, the sounds, the names on every shop sign. If he was going to find his way back, he needed a plan. But the next morning, as he stepped out into the street, he noticed something that chilled him to the bone. A man in a gray coat was watching him, not just passing glances, but truly watching. And when Elio crossed the street, the man followed. Elio turned sharply into an alleyway, his heart thudding in his chest. The damp walls loomed around him, shadowed and narrow. He glanced over his shoulder. Yes, the man in the gray coat had followed him. Calm, precise steps. Not hurried. Not aggressive. but determined. He ducked behind a stack of crates, breath shallow. Through the slats, he saw the man pause at the alley's mouth. He lit a cigarette and waited, as if he knew Elio would come back out eventually. Why was he being followed? Was this some kind of paradox catching up to him? Or had he already changed something? Elio waited until the man turned and began walking away. Then, with a sudden burst of courage, he emerged and followed him. The streets were busy enough for Elio to blend in. The man walked with confidence through the Lower West Side, eventually stopping outside an old building that looked abandoned from the outside. But the moment the man stepped through the door, it flickered. Just slightly. Like a mirage. Elio's breath caught. He knew that shimmer. The same ripple he had seen when he first activated the copper watch. He waited until dusk before returning. The streets thinned. The lights dimmed. The door stood still and solid now, no shimmer. He pressed his hand to the wood and felt a faint vibration beneath his fingers, like the ticking of a hidden clock. Then he heard a voice. "You should not be here." Elio spun. The man in the gray coat stood behind him once more.
"Close now."
Older than Elio had first realized, but his posture was military straight. I don't know who you are," Elio began, "but I'm just trying to get home." "I didn't mean to." "You traveled using the watch," the man interrupted. Elio's breath stopped. "How do you know that?" The man stepped forward, his coat swaying like a curtain. "Because that watch belongs to a sequence that was dismantled decades ago. All of them were supposed to be lost. Yours should not exist." "I found it in my grandfather's shop," Elio said carefully. The man's eyes narrowed. "That is not possible. Unless—" He paused. Then his tone changed. "You need to come with me.
Now.
Before someone else finds you." "Who are you?" Elio asked, stepping back instinctively. "I am a keeper. And right now, you are a crack in time that should not be open." Suddenly, from the alley behind them, a voice called out. "He's not going anywhere with you, Ferris." Another figure stepped into the lamplight. A woman in a leather jacket, holding what looked like a compass that glowed blue in the center. Ferris, the man in the gray coat, stiffened. "You're interfering again, Clara. Better me than what's waiting if you drag him through that door." Elio stood frozen between them, his hand brushing against the copper watch in his pocket, feeling it grow warmer by the second. Something had been set in motion, and he was right at the center of it. Clara held the glowing compass tightly, her eyes fixed on Elio. The tension between her and Ferris crackled like the charged air before a storm. Neither moved for several long seconds. Then Clara spoke, calm but firm. "Elio, if you go with him, you'll never find your way back. He thinks rules will fix this. But the truth is, the rules broke a long time ago." Ferris's jaw clenched. "You're endangering all timelines. You don't even know where he belongs." "I know enough," Clara replied. "And I know what happens if you take him through that door." Elio stepped back, the ground beneath his feet feeling increasingly fragile. The copper watch was now vibrating faintly in his pocket, as if it recognized the presence of the compass. "What do you want from me?" Elio asked. "Why does this watch matter so much?" Clara turned to him slowly. "Because you're not just a traveler, Elio. The watch didn't choose you by accident. It only responds to certain lineages, those with a link to the original architects." Elio's brow furrowed. "Architects." Ferris exhaled through his nose. "This is foolish. You're feeding him half-truths. He'll never control the watch properly unless he's trained. He'll never survive if he's caged." Clara snapped back. Elio glanced between them. The decision hung heavily in the air. Then, without warning, the copper watch glowed. Brilliant light spilled from his pocket, forcing all three of them to shield their eyes. The compass in Clara's hand pulsed in rhythm. Ferris took a step back, eyes wide. "Elio, step away from both of us," Clara warned.
"Now."
But it was too late. A burst of energy flared out from the watch and compass in unison. Time itself seemed to warp around them. The street blurred. The air shifted. Elio felt a sudden weightlessness, as if falling, but upward. Then, all at once, silence. He landed hard on solid ground. He was no longer on the street. He was in a circular room with high walls made of brass and glass. Dozens of ticking clocks lined the walls, each showing a different time. A library of moments. In the center stood a podium. On it sat a journal, open to a page that bore his name in careful script. Elio Sterling. He turned slowly. Clara stood beside him, breathing heavily, eyes wide with disbelief. "I didn't think the watch would open this place," she said. "Where are we?" Elio asked, stunned. Clara ran her fingers along the edge of the podium. "This is the Ore, a place outside of time. Only the true bearer of the architect's watch can enter it." Elio stared at the journal. Its ink shimmered as if still drying. "How is my name here?" "Because your story has already begun," Clara said softly. "And this place is where it's written." Behind them, one of the clocks began to tick faster. Then another. And another. Something had noticed their arrival. And it was waking up. The ticking grew louder. A steady rhythm at first, then accelerating until it echoed like a heartbeat through the brass chamber. Clara grabbed Elio's wrist. "We can't stay," she whispered. "The Ore protects time, but it also remembers intruders." Elio hesitated. "But the journal, my name, will come back." "I promise," she said. "But if the keepers wake up, we won't get another chance." They ran. Clara led him through an archway hidden behind a moving set of gears. The passage was narrow, carved from old stone, and streaked with copper veins. Elio felt a strange pull behind them, as if time itself resisted their departure. After several minutes of twisting corridors, they emerged into a wide atrium. Light streamed in through a stained-glass ceiling, depicting celestial charts and phases of the moon. In the center stood a shallow pool with rippling silver liquid. "What is this place?" Elio asked, his voice hushed. Clara approached the pool and knelt beside it. "A memory well. The architects built them to record echoes of time, things that once happened, things that almost happened, and things that were never meant to happen." Elio peered into the liquid. At first, it reflected only the glass ceiling above. Then it shifted. A scene appeared. A young boy, himself, was sitting in the snow outside his childhood home, crying softly. His mother appeared behind him, wrapping a coat around his shoulders. The warmth of her presence reached across the years.
He gasped.
"I remember this." Clara stood beside him. The watch responds to memory. The stronger the emotion, the clearer the echo. Then the scene shifted. Now, Elio was older. He stood at the edge of a rooftop, watching the sunset. But something was off. He looked older than he should be, his face worn, his eyes hollow. And he was alone. "No one ever came back," the older Elio whispered. "Not Clara. Not Ferris. Not even time." The pool rippled again, returning to silver. Elio turned to Clara, shaken. Was that the future? Clara didn't answer. She stepped back, her face pale. That wasn't a memory. That was a warning. Before Elio could respond, the air shifted once more. A coldness swept through the room. The stained glass above them dimmed. And in the far shadows, 3 figures emerged. Tall, hooded, and silent. Their movements graceful, but deliberate. Clara pulled Elio behind her. "The keepers." The central figure raised its hand. A pulse of energy froze the air. The memory well stilled. "You have trespassed," the figure said, its voice layered with echoes. "The boy carries what should not be carried. Return the watch." Elio stepped forward, heart racing. "I don't even know how it works." "Then you are not ready to wield it," the keeper said. "Give it back or be unmade." Clara tensed, but Elio touched her arm. He faced the keepers, trembling but steady. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "But if this watch chose me, then I have to see it through." The central keeper tilted its head. "So be it. The path ahead leads only deeper. You may not find your way back." "I'm not alone," Elio replied. The keepers vanished like mist. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was unexpected. Elio turned back to the memory well. The pool shimmered again, and this time, a map formed in its surface. Clara leaned in. It's showing us the next thread. We have to follow it. But Elio, from this point on, there's no such thing as safe. They stepped closer to the map, committing its markings to memory. The journey was far from over. Something had begun to unravel, and they were standing in its center. The map from the memory well burned itself into Elio's thoughts like a brand. Every curve, every line, it felt both ancient and new, as though it had always been waiting for him. They followed it through the underbelly of New York's hidden history. Not the subways, but deeper, beneath even the old vaults and forgotten railways. The city's heartbeat faded as they descended further, the watch pulsing faintly against Elio's wrist. Eventually they reached it. The spiral. It was not a staircase, though it wound downwards. It was more like a tunnel carved by time itself, walls embedded with fossilized clock faces, shattered mirrors, and rusted compass needles. The air buzzed faintly, charged with unseen currents. Clara stopped at the edge. This is the place where timelines bleed into each other. It's the only way forward, but it's unstable. Anything we do in here might ripple outward. Elio looked ahead. The path was narrow and steep, veiled in shifting light and shadow. So what do? We stay together. And we don't trust what we see. They stepped in. Almost immediately, Elio felt his footing falter. The spiral didn't just curve, it folded. He saw flashes at the edge of his vision.
People.
Places. Moments that had never happened. He saw his mother, younger than he remembered, laughing in a garden that never existed. Then himself, older again, arguing with Ferris inside the orrery, shouting about something that had not yet come to pass. Clara gripped his hand. Focus. They're only fragments. Possibilities. Don't let them take hold. But the spiral pulled harder with every step. Then they reached a landing. The walls here were smooth, polished like obsidian. In the center of the room stood a device unlike any Elio had seen, a mechanical globe, slowly spinning. Inside it was a suspended thread of light, coiled and twitching like it was alive. Clara's approached it carefully. This is a fracture node. A piece of time that has broken away from the main flow. Elio stared. Can we fix it? Clara hesitated. We can anchor it. But to do that, we need something stable. Something that still remembers where it belongs. Elio looked at the watch. Suddenly, the spinning globe flared. A burst of light erupted, and a vision gripped them both. They stood in Times Square, but it was empty. The lights flickered without power. A thick mist curled through the streets, and time itself seemed paused. Frozen mid-motion. Cars hung in the air. Birds hung mid-flight. And in the distance stood Ferris, older, altered, his eyes silver and strange. He spoke without moving his mouth. You broke the thread, Elio. You let her guide you too far. Then the vision shattered. Elio dropped to one knee, gasping. Clara looked equally shaken. That was a potential outcome. We haven't caused it yet, but it's close, Elio said. Clara nodded slowly. That's why the spiral brought us here. We need to stabilize the fracture before that future becomes the only one. She placed her hand on the watch, and Elio did the same. The thread of light responded, lashing out, wrapping around their wrists like silk made of lightning. Pain surged through Elio's chest, then calm. The watch ticked once. The thread fused into it. The spinning globe slowed, then stopped. The room exhaled. The walls shifted back into rough stone. The spiral behind them dimmed. Clara staggered slightly. It worked. We sealed the fracture. Elio looked at her, sweat on his brow. But it won't be the last, will it? Clara shook her head.
No.
There are more. The further we go, the more unstable it gets. Elio felt the watch pulsing again, this time stronger. A faint blue light glowed from its face, forming a new symbol, one he didn't recognize. We should keep moving, he said, before the spiral decides to show us something worse. They stepped back into the winding path, deeper into the forgotten veins of the city, leaving behind the stabilized fracture and heading towards whatever broken future awaited them next. New York no longer felt like a city above. It had become a labyrinth beneath, a second world pulsing with forgotten time, whispering fragments of stories that never fully unfolded. Elio and Clara emerged from the spiral to find themselves in a corridor veined with copper tubing and flickering lights, some pulsing in rhythm with the watch. It was colder here, and the air felt thinner, as if time was compressed, weighed down by the very walls around them. "Where are we now?" Elio asked quietly. Clara traced a hand across a pipe. "This is the interstitial, a place between events. A crack in the city's history where timelines momentarily rest. They call it the veins because it feeds the rest of the system." "The system?" Elio echoed. Clara nodded. "The clockwork continuum. A network of pathways, all beneath the city, regulating the flows of time. And somewhere in this system, Ferris is still moving." The corridor forked into three. Elio's watch vibrated faintly, then pointed left. He followed it without question. The passage sloped downward, into a chamber where every wall was covered in glass panels, each one playing loops of moments from different versions of New York. Some nearly identical to their own, others disturbingly off. In one panel, Elio watched himself reading in the library, but with no Clara. In another, he stood on the Brooklyn Bridge, surrounded by flames. Another showed Ferris on a rooftop, laughing madly, holding the watch as it split open and poured stars into the sky. "We're looking at echoes," Clara said. "Shadows of what could have been. The deeper we go, the harder it gets to stay anchored." "Why is he doing this?" Elio asked, staring at the looping visions. "Ferris, I mean." Clara was silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, "He's not trying to destroy time. He's trying to escape it." They moved past the room of echoes, into a long stretch lined with rotating machines, each clicking in time with the others. The rhythm was hypnotic, and Elio found himself drawn toward them. As he passed, gears shifted and displayed numbers.
Dates.
"Do you see that?" he asked. Clara nodded. "They're time pulses. They track disturbances. Someone's already been here. Recently." A sharp clang echoed down the corridor. Elio spun, heart racing. Shadows moved behind one of the machines. Clara pulled him back just in time as a bolt of energy burst from the wall, barely missing them. Someone was here. From the shadows emerged a figure in a long coat, face obscured beneath a hood. A mechanical eye glowed faintly from the left side of their mask. "Elio Vance," the voice rasped. It was neither young nor old, neither male nor female. "You walk too far down paths not meant for you." "Who are you?" Elio asked, stepping forward. "I am a curator," the figure said. "One of the silent archive. We keep what must not be lost, and guard what must not be found." Clara's voice hardened. "You used to protect the timelines. Now you trap them. What are you doing here?" "I follow Ferris." "Just as you do," the curator replied. "But where you seek to repair, he seeks to evolve. You won't stop him. You don't understand what he is becoming." With that, the curator raised a device and activated it. The walls shimmered, and one of the glass panels burst open. A flood of light rushed in, and the chamber around them warped. Elio shouted, grabbing Clara as they were both pulled through the breach. Suddenly, they were no longer in the veins. They stood in a version of Grand Central Station, but abandoned, overgrown with vines and dusted in ash. The ceiling was shattered, exposing a red, unmoving sky. Broken clocks littered the floor, ticking without rhythm. "What is this?" Elio gasped. Clara looked around in horror. "We're in a collapsed timeline. A failed possibility. The archive must have used the breach to trap us here." Elio's watch sparked. Its face flickered, struggling to regain stability. They needed to get out.
Fast.
Clara scanned the broken station. "There should be an exit node somewhere. If we can find the pulse signature, we can force a thread jump." Elio nodded, already running, scanning for the flicker of energy. In the far corner, beneath a pile of shattered benches, he saw it, a thin pillar of light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Here," he called out. Together, they scrambled over the debris. Clara touched the watch to the light. The pulse synchronized, once, twice. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the ruins. "Leave it, Elio," came Ferris's voice. He was nowhere to be seen, but his presence was heavy in the air. "You don't understand what happens if you bring stability. You don't know what you're restoring." Elio's jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but I know what I'm stopping." He pressed the watch into the light. There was a burst of heat, a rising hum, then silence. They collapsed into darkness. Elio woke to silence. Not the kind found in solitude, but the eerie stillness of a place holding its breath. He was lying on a stone floor, cracked and moss-covered. Overhead, dim light filtered through a shattered dome. Clara stirred beside him, eyes slowly blinking open. "Where are we now?" she whispered. Elio sat up, scanning the space. They were inside what looked like a massive archive hall, shelves rising impossibly high into the shadows above. Dust hung in the air like fine ash, and the smell of old paper and electricity lingered. Strange mechanical contraptions hovered silently between the rows, their gears unmoving, like they were sleeping. "This isn't just another timeline," Elio murmured. This feels like the core." Clara stood, brushing dust from her coat. "The archive brought us here for a reason. This is the knot. The place where all timelines twist together. A point of memory where the past folds over itself." She touched a nearby wall. Instantly, the surface shimmered into a moving image, Clara as a child, sitting on a bench in Central Park, watching someone walk away. "That's..." Clara paused. "I've never seen this memory. Not like this." "They're not just storing time here," Elio realized. "They're preserving feeling, choices, regrets." His watch vibrated. One of the hovering constructs stirred in response and floated down towards them. It spoke in a monotone voice. "Access request registered. Subject, Elio Vance. Thread unlocked." A beam of light shot down from the machine. In its center, a scene emerged. Elio, younger, standing in the lobby of the Metropolitan Museum. His parents were arguing. A child Elio clutched a book, unnoticed, invisible. Elio looked away, throat tight. "They're showing you your hinges," Clara said quietly. "Moments where your timeline bent, where decisions echoed loudest." The construct turned toward her. Subject, Clara Byrne. Thread locked. Permission required. Clara flinched. "No," she said quickly. "Don't show mine." The light vanished. A door at the far end of the archive creaked open. Cold wind rolled through. "We have to keep moving," Clara said, already walking. They passed rows of recorded threads, flickering with lives not their own. A woman waking from a coma, an old man tearing a letter in two, a boy hesitating before crossing the street. Thousands of tiny choices suspended in eternal recall. Then they saw it. A central dais in the room, glowing with a tangled web of light. At its center stood Ferris. He looked changed. No longer just a man. His coat shimmered as if woven from clock hands, his skin etched with glowing threads. One of his eyes burned with a golden ring of time. "Elio," he said, smiling with something close to warmth. "You made it." Clara stepped forward, voice cold. "What have you done?" Ferris gestured to the glowing threads. "I'm freeing them, unbinding timelines. This city was never meant to follow a single line. It pulses with possibility. I'm just letting it breathe." "You're tearing it apart," Elio said. "People are slipping. Realities are cracking." Ferris walked slowly around the dais. "And yet we're still here, aren't we? Still thinking we can control time. Archive it. Lock it up in gears and shelves. What if it doesn't want to be controlled?" The threads around him twisted and shimmered. Some frayed and fell away. Elio took a step closer. "Why show us this? Why not just erase us?" Ferris tilted his head. "Because you need to understand. Before you decide." "Decide what?" Clara asked. Ferris reached into the center of the web and withdrew something pulsing with gold. Another watch, more ancient, older than the one Elio carried. "There's a choice," Ferris said. "You can help me release the city from time's grip. Let the timelines merge, live free from sequence." He turned to Elio. Or you can use your watch to restore the core. Lock everything back into place. No second chances. No alternate paths. Elio felt the weight of the moment settle on him. The watch on his wrist ticked louder. Ferris smiled faintly. I won't stop you. But make no mistake. Whatever you choose, the city will remember. The room dimmed. The knot pulsed. And the threads swirled around Elio, waiting. Elio stood at the center of the knot, threads of time spiraling around him in slow, uncertain orbits. His fingers hovered above his watch, its face flickering wildly between golden light and deep shadow. Clara remained silent beside him, her expression unreadable. Ferris waited, arms calmly folded, as if he already knew the answer. But Elio did not. The threads whispered now, not in words, but in moments, visions blinking through his mind. His mother's laugh echoing from years ago. Clara's tears in the rain the night she first told him about her father's death. Ferris once handing him a blueprint saying, "This is not a machine. It's a choice." The archive began to tremble. Clara stepped forward. If you destroy the core, Ferris, what happens to the people already unmoored? What happens to those clinging to one version of their life? Ferris's voice was soft. They become real. Not fragments. Not echoes. They live, not as footnotes, but as truth. That's not truth, she said. That's chaos dressed as freedom. Elio's grip on the watch tightened. He turned to Ferris. You wanted this city to remember everything, but you're making it forget how to move forward. There's no meaning in a life without direction. Ferris met his gaze. And yet, every direction is a life. Suddenly, the entire chamber shuddered. The knot flared in the center, crackling like lightning trying to break free of glass. The shelves of memory around them began to twist, their contents dissolving into mist. The watch on Elio's wrist began to burn. Ferris shouted over the rising noise. It's too late. You've waited too long. Choice is collapsing into convergence. Clara grabbed Elio's arm. We have to leave.
Now.
No, Elio yelled back. Not yet. He reached into his coat and pulled out the pulse key, one of the earliest artifacts he'd taken from the archive's vault. It shimmered with the same pattern as the knot. An emergency override. A reset. Elio, don't, Ferris warned. You don't understand what that will do. But Elio's fingers slammed the pulse key into the watch. A thunderous shockwave exploded outward. Time fractured. For a single heartbeat, everything was frozen. The shelves. The machines. Ferris. Clara. Even Elio himself. Then, they were falling. Not down but through. Through timelines. Elio saw flashes all around him. A version of himself who never left the orphanage. Another who never met Clara. One where Ferris was his father. One where the archive burned. One where New York was underwater, stars visible through broken windows. They landed hard. The sky above was black, but still. Not night, but absence. Around them, the city had returned, but twisted. Times were layered like torn posters, flashes of 1920s cars beside levitating trains, men in bowler hats walking through digital adverts. What did you do? Clara whispered. Elio stumbled to his feet. I tried to stabilize the knot. Ferris was gone. The watch had stopped ticking. And something else had taken its place. Where the watch had been was now a circle of light embedded into Elio's palm, threads spinning slowly beneath the skin. The city was alive, but unsteady. Time was cracked, not broken. Clara touched a wall. It shifted to show a memory, then another, then flickered, failing to settle. Elio looked out at the skyline. It shimmered like heat haze, timelines overlapping in every building. This isn't restoration, Clara said quietly. This is transition. Elio nodded. It's not the end. It's a beginning. But it's not what I wanted. No, she agreed. But it might be what the city needs. Behind them, the knot, the true core, still pulsed, now bound inside Elio's hand. And somewhere, in the echoes of the past, Ferris's voice whispered, faint but clear. All clocks collapse. But memory remembers how to begin again. The sun rose over New York, but it was not the sun of yesterday. Its light passed through fractured towers, casting ripples across the skyline where time no longer flowed in a straight line. Instead, it curved, folding gently over parks, streets, and rooftops like a quilt stitched from moments. Elio stood at the highest ledge of the reconstructed archive building. Below, the city buzzed, not with confusion, but with cautious curiosity. People walked through streets where yesterday could appear in the reflection of a shop window and tomorrow might drift by in a train overhead. Children chased shadows that did not belong to them. Artists painted with memories. Old radios broadcast conversations from lost relatives. It was strange, but it was living. Clara approached, her hair tousled by the new breeze. "They're adapting faster than we expected," she said, glancing down.
They always do, Elio replied.
Humans have always lived between what was and what might be. In the weeks that followed the collapse, Elio had become something else. The watch, now embedded into his palm, was no longer a tool. It was a connection to every thread of memory running through the city, not to control but to listen. The knot had changed him. He could feel when a moment was repeating too tightly, when a memory was weighing someone down, or when a thread snapped too early. He had become the caretaker of time's rhythm, not its master. Clara smiled faintly. The council still wants to classify this as a level Z anomaly. They say we broke the world. Maybe we did, Elio said. But I'd argue it was already cracked. We just let the light in. They descended the steps of the archive, now a public forum. Its once forbidden chambers were open to all. Inside, families traced their own timelines with glowing threads. Some rewrote them. Some let them fade. Others wept and whispered thank you. No one asked for perfection. They asked only for choice. Ferris had not returned. Some believed he was lost between years. Others thought he had become part of the knot itself, a ghost of thought, a whisper in Elio's hand. But Elio knew. Ferris had become silence, and silence, too, was a kind of memory. As the day deepened, Elio and Clara walked to the waterfront, where the East River now shimmered with visions, showing fragments of what never came to pass. People stood there in peace, not fear. They had learned not to grasp too tightly. They had learned to look and let go. A boy passed Elio, wide-eyed, pointing at the light in his palm. "Are you the one who fixed time?" Elio crouched down, smiled softly.
No.
"I just listened to it." The boy blinked. "Can I do that?" "You already are," Elio said. Clara took his hand as they continued walking, leaving behind the tower and the city that no longer hid its memories. The future was not a destination.
It was a song.
And at last, New York had remembered how to sing.